I have boarded 11 ships in my career as a captain of fortune, which is the polite term for what the coalition calls me on official paperwork, and the impolite term is more accurate. 11 ships, 4 species, 1 language barrier I never did solve, and not once, not on a single occasion prior to this one, did the crew of a disabled vessel offer me a beverage, the loose change. I wanted on record that this was genuinely the name painted on the hull, in human script, under a second smaller line reading "not responsible for jokes made under pressure," which I did not understand at the time and understood far too well by the end of the night, was drifting 9 hours off the Perrin corridor with its drive signature dead, and its running lights doing the slow, arrhythmic blink that meant a reactor casualty rather than an ambush. My sensor officer Des ran it 3 times and got the same answer 3 times. 1 life sign aboard, human, no weapons fire in the ship's recent history, cargo hold reading heavy on something her instruments couldn't fully resolve through the hull shielding, an easy target. The kind of target you dream about when you've spent 6 months chasing cargo runs that turn out to be full of nothing worth the fuel. I took 4 crew and went in through the aft airlock, because the aft airlock was already cycling open when we arrived, which should have told me something and did not, because I was thinking about how much easier this was going to be than usual. The human was sitting in the galley, not hiding. Not braced behind a bulkhead with a weapon he didn't know how to use, which is the second most common thing I find aboard disabled ships, right after crew who have simply locked themselves in the escape pod and left the rest of the vessel to whatever comes through the door. He was sitting at a small fold-out table with a mug in front of him, one leg crossed over the other, wearing the specific expression of a man waiting for a delayed transport, rather than a man watching 4 armed strangers walk into his kitchen. "You're earlier than I figured," he said. "Coffee's still hot if you want some. There's a second mug in the cabinet above the sink, 3rd from the left. Don't take the one with the chip in it. That one's mine specifically, and I have opinions about it. I have been threatened in 6 languages. I have had weapons drawn on me, wept at, bargained with, and once, memorably, bitten. I did not, in that moment, have a procedure for a hostage offering me his second favorite mug. "You will remain seated," I said, which felt like the correct thing to say and also immediately like I had lost some kind of contest I hadn't known we were playing. "I am seated," he agreed. "Very seated. Extremely compliant seating happening here. You want that coffee or not? It's getting cold and I hate wasting a pot." Des, behind me, made a small sound I recognized after 4 campaigns together as the sound she made when she genuinely did not know what to do with her hands. His name, he told us without being asked twice, was Corwin Achebi Lindqvist, which he shortened for our convenience to Cor, and which I initially assumed was a lie of the kind hostages tell to seem harmless, right up until he produced actual identification when I demanded it, because apparently that is simply his name. Humans do this. They stack surnames like cargo pallets, and nobody questions it. "Cargo manifest," I said. "Location? Now. Holds aft, obviously. It's the only room on the ship big enough to hold anything. You'll want the access panel on the left. The right one sticks. I keep meaning to fix it." He took a sip of his coffee. "Can I ask what you're planning to do with 40 crates of unstabilized reactor coolant rods once you've got them? Because I ask professionally, not to be difficult. They're not dangerous exactly, but they're extremely particular about temperature, and your ship doesn't strike me as the kind of operation with a climate-controlled hold. No offense. I had not until that sentence considered what I was planning to do with the cargo beyond taking it, which is generally the whole plan, and I did not appreciate having the gap in my planning pointed out to me by the man I was currently holding at gunpoint. "That will be my concern," I said. Sure. Just saying if they cook off, it's not going to be quiet, and I'd hate for you to find that out the hard way on account of my manifest being unclear. I can walk you through the handling protocol if you want. Genuinely no charge. Professional courtesy." Des leaned toward me. "Captain," she said quietly in our own tongue, "why is he being helpful?" I did not have an answer. I have thought about it since at some length, and I still do not entirely have one, though I have a better guess now than I did that night. We moved him to the cargo bay under guard, while my remaining crew searched the ship for anything he hadn't mentioned, which is standard procedure, and which produced nothing, because as far as I could determine across a full sweep of every compartment on that vessel, Core had told us the complete and accurate truth about every single thing we asked him. This was, in 11 boardings, unprecedented. Hostages lie. Hostages lie reflexively, out of fear, out of hope, out of the animal conviction that a lie might buy them something a truth won't. Core answered every question with the mild, unbothered accuracy of a man filling out a customs form he had filled out many times before and found only mildly tedious. My second-in-command, a Voss named Thren, who I have never once known to be rattled by anything smaller than a hull breach, came back from the search with an expression I did not have a name for at the time. I have since decided the closest translation is mildly offended on principle. "Captain," Thren said, "the escape pod is stocked with 3 days of rations, a working medical kit, and a small paper card taped to the hatch that reads, and I'm translating this exactly. If you're reading this because things went badly, I'm sorry. Take whatever you need. There's a second card in the ration tin with instructions for the pod's manual release. It sticks a little. Sorry again." "He left instructions," I said, "for the boarding party, in case the boarding went badly for us." "For anyone," Thren corrected. "The card doesn't specify who it's addressed to. I believe it may simply be his habit." I asked him about it directly later, and he confirmed this without any apparent sense that it required defending. "You'd be amazed how often that card gets used by people who aren't the crew," he told me. "Pirates, salvagers, once a very confused customs inspector who boarded the wrong ship entirely. Seemed easier to just write it once and let it apply broadly. I don't love the idea of someone dying in my escape pod because I didn't bother labeling the release lever. The search also turned up in a locker near the galley, a stack of what I initially assumed to be some kind of coded ledger, and what Core, when asked, identified without hesitation as the guest log, a genuine and apparently sincerely maintained record of every boarding, inspection, and unplanned visitor the loose change had received across roughly 6 years of operation, complete with brief, courteous notes on each. I read 3 entries before I had to stop. Coalition customs, standard inspection, very thorough, left the ship cleaner than they found it. Appreciated. Pirate crew Denhall, 4 members, took the spare parts and half the ration stores, left in a hurry. One of them apologized on the way out, which I thought was decent of him given the circumstances. Salvage team believed us derelict, extremely embarrassed to discover otherwise. We had a nice conversation about drive couplings before they left. Exchanged contact information. Might actually do business with them properly sometime. "You keep a record," I said, "of the people who rob you." "I keep a record of everyone who comes aboard," Core said. "Robbing me is just a category. Priya says I should stop being polite to people who are actively stealing from us, and I keep telling her politeness isn't a resource I'm going to run out of partway through a bad week, so I might as well spend it." He considered this. "You'll get an entry too for what it's worth. I try to be fair about it. So far, you're trending toward the better half." Des, standing near the hatch, made the small sound again. "How many crew?" I asked him, standing over the coolant crates while he sat on one of them uninvited with his mug, which he had somehow brought along. "Just me. Well, me and Priya, but she's not aboard right now. She took the shuttle out 4 hours ago to do a hull inspection on the drive nacelle, because our reactor casualty put a stress crack in the housing, and she's the only one of us who actually likes crawling around in vacuum suits fixing things, which, between us, I've never understood. But I'm grateful for it, because otherwise it'd be me out there, and I am considerably less good at it." "Where is she now?" He checked something on a wrist device, unhurried. "Should be finishing up in about," he considered, 20 minutes, give or take. She's thorough. I'd expect a check-in call any minute now, actually. She likes to let me know how it's going, mostly so I don't worry, which is thoughtful of her because I would worry. She's not always careful with the tethering clips. I did not at the time register the specific shape of what he had just told me. I registered only that he was still talking, pleasantly, as though the two of us were killing time in a waiting room rather than standing in a cargo hold with 3 of my crew holding weapons on him. You do not seem concerned, I said. For a man whose ship has been boarded, I'm concerned about the coolant rods mostly. And a little bit about my mug because Renata over there, he nodded at Des, whose name he had somehow already learned, keeps eyeing it, and I really would rather it not get knocked off the crate. Otherwise, no, not especially concerned. You seem like reasonable people. Reasonable people don't usually shoot the guy who's being cooperative and also making conversation, in my experience. And if you're not reasonable people, well, being concerned wasn't going to change the outcome much either way, so I don't see the return on the investment. I want to be clear that I have encountered bravado before. Bravado is common, and it is, almost universally, a mask over fear, thin enough that you can see the shape of the fear underneath it if you know where to look, and I know where to look. It is a substantial part of what makes me good at my work. I looked, with Core, for the shape underneath the calm. I did not find one. There was no mask. As far as I could determine, he simply was not afraid, in the specific total way that a person is not afraid of a chair. And this troubled me considerably more than fear would have. Because fear I know the shape of. And this had no shape I recognized at all. The check-in call came 14 minutes later, which I noted because he had said 20 and been reasonably close, which meant he had not been inventing the number to unsettle me. He had simply been giving me an accurate estimate, the way you'd tell anyone the time. Priya, he said into the device before I could stop him, and I did not stop him fast enough because I was still processing the fact that he'd been right about the timing. How's the nacelle look? Her voice came through clipped and businesslike, the specific cadence of someone reporting a status rather than having a conversation. Cracks worse than the scan showed. Going to need another hour, maybe 90 minutes. How's the ship? We've got company, Core said, in precisely the same relaxed tone he'd used to ask about my crew's plans for illegal reactor coolant. 4 of them, boarding party, seem professional enough. I'm being a good host. There was a pause on the line. Do I need to come back? No, finish the nacelle. We'll need it either way this ends. I'll manage. Another pause. Bring the kit when you're done, though, just in case. He ended the call and looked back at me with the same mild expression he'd worn through the entire exchange. And it was at that point, specifically at the phrase just in case, delivered with no more weight than a grocery list, that the shape of what I did not understand began finally to resolve into something I did. What kit? I said. Oh, nothing dramatic. Priya's a very practical person. It's mostly medical, honestly, in case anybody gets hurt in whatever happens next, which I sincerely hope nobody does, on either side. I'm not looking for trouble here. But it does also have a signal booster in it, which, since our main array's down along with the reactor, would let us get a distress call further than our current setup can manage. She'll have that running about the same time she's done with the nacelle, give or take. You are telling me, I said slowly, that you intend to call for help. I'm telling you I already have help, and she's about 90 minutes from finishing what she's doing, and after that she'll have the means to call for more of it if things haven't sorted themselves out by then. I'm not telling you this to threaten you. I promise you if this were a bluff I'd have made it sound a lot more dramatic than she needs another hour and a half for the nacelle. Bluffs are supposed to be scary. This is just Tuesday. I want to describe as precisely as I can what happened inside me in the silence that followed that sentence, because it is the reason I am telling this story at all, and it is not the reason you would expect. I was not afraid of the reinforcement. 90 minutes is a long time, and I had 4 armed crew, a functioning ship, and a hostage who had not, in the entire span of our acquaintance, attempted to fight, flee, or deceive me in any way I could detect. By every calculation available to me, I still held every advantage that mattered. What unsettled me was that Core did not appear to be calculating anything at all. He was not weighing his odds, the way a frightened man weighs his odds, searching for the angle that gets him out alive. He had simply told me the truth, the whole truth, including the part where he had more time than I might have liked, because withholding it would not have changed the outcome, and he apparently saw no value in managing information he had no intention of using as leverage. He was not negotiating with me. He did not seem to believe there was anything to negotiate. He was simply narrating events as they occurred, to whoever happened to be in the room, with the same unbothered clarity he'd have used describing the weather. I have since spoken with 2 other captains of fortune who have run into humans under similar circumstances, and both of them, independently, used a version of the same phrase to describe it. He talked like nothing that happened to him mattered enough to lie about. One of them, a Ketran named Vosh, who I trust considerably, put it more precisely than I have managed here. "It's not that he wasn't scared," Vosh told me. "I think he might have been, somewhere underneath it. It's that being scared didn't change what he said next. Every other species I've boarded, the fear gets into the words somehow. His didn't. I don't know what to do with a man whose fear doesn't leak." I asked Kor much later, near the end of the night, after everything had resolved the way it resolved, whether he had in fact been afraid. "Some," he said. "Sure. But being scared and having a coffee aren't mutually exclusive activities in my experience. You can do both. Most people don't practice doing both, so it looks strange when someone does. I've had worse Tuesdays than this one, is really the whole secret. Once you've had a genuinely bad one, the merely inconvenient ones stop registering the same way." Thren used the interval to run the numbers with me. Quietly, off to the side of the cargo bay, in the clipped operational shorthand we'd developed across 4 campaigns of doing exactly this kind of arithmetic, under exactly this kind of pressure. 90 minutes, give or take, before the second human returned with a signal booster and a medical kit that might or might not contain anything more useful than bandages. A functioning drive on our own ship, no damage taken, no shots fired, which was itself a kind of small miracle in this line of work. A cargo hold full of coolant rods we now had reason to believe were considerably less profitable and considerably more hazardous to transport than they'd looked on the initial scan. "We could still take the cargo and be gone before she's back," Thren said. 90 minutes is enough time if we move now and don't waste any more of it standing here." "We could," I agreed. "And if Kor is lying to us about the rods needing climate control, we'd be hauling 40 crates of unstable material back to a ship with no capacity to keep them stable. On the word of a man I have not caught in a single lie all evening, and have correspondingly less and less reason to expect one from now." Thren considered this. "You believe him? About the coolant? I believe he has had no reason to lie to us about anything so far, and I do not understand why that would change now, specifically about the one detail most likely to get us all killed if he were lying." I looked at Kor, who was refilling his mug from a small pot he had at some point during our conversation, retrieved from somewhere without any of my crew stopping him, because none of us had quite worked out at what point stopping him had stopped seeming necessary. That unsettles me considerably more than a threat would. I did not wait 90 minutes. I want that understood clearly, because a great deal of the version of this story that circulates now, in the versions my own crew tell in ports where I am not present to correct them, has me sitting frozen in that cargo bay for an hour and a half, paralyzed by a man with a mug. This is not accurate. I made a decision within perhaps 6 minutes of understanding what Priya's return would mean, and the decision was the correct one for a captain of fortune to make, which is that unstabilized coolant rods, a hostage who would not break, and reinforcements inbound on a fixed and known timeline, did not constitute a target worth the exposure, whatever my initial estimate of the prize had been. "We are leaving," I told my crew. Des looked, I noted, faintly relieved, which I chose not to comment on at the time, and have chosen not to comment on since. Kor stood from the crate, straightened, and extended a hand toward me in the specific human gesture I had encountered exactly once before and had not, until that moment, understood the purpose of. I did not take it. He did not seem offended. "For what it's worth," he said, "you were more polite about the whole thing than the last people who tried this. And you're welcome to the coffee on your way out. There's more in the pot. Least I can do, for the company." I left the coffee. I have thought about that decision more than the decision seems to warrant. We were 3 hours out, drive signature clean, cargo hold as empty as we'd found it, before Des finally asked the question I could tell she had been sitting on since the airlock. Why didn't he fight us? He had no weapon, we found. No way to stop 4 of us if we'd simply taken what we wanted and left him where he sat. He didn't need to fight us, I said, and I was still working out as I said it whether I believed my own answer. He simply refused to be afraid of us in the way we needed him to be, and it turns out that is its own kind of resistance, and I did not have a countermeasure prepared for it because nobody had ever told me I would need one. That seems like a strange way to win a fight, Des said. By having coffee. It is, I agreed. I intend to spend a considerable amount of time thinking about why it worked anyway. I have, since that night, boarded 3 more vessels, none of them human, and I have found myself, on each occasion, briefly and uselessly bracing for a mug that never appears. My crew have started, quietly, to make a habit of checking for beverages before we check for weapons, which I have not discouraged, because I have come to suspect that a species whose fear does not leak into its voice is considerably more dangerous, in the long run, than one whose weapons simply do more damage. Weapons, at least, I know how to plan around. Oh, how. I have also, for what it is worth, started keeping a version of Core's guest log aboard my own ship, though I have not told my crew why, and I doubt any of them would guess it if I did. It began, if I am honest with myself, as something close to mockery, a private joke at the expense of a man who had beaten me without ever once raising his voice, a way of proving to myself that I had understood the trick well enough to borrow it. It has not stayed a joke. There is something clarifying about writing down, plainly and without embellishment, exactly what happened during an encounter that could have gone badly and did not. The same way Core's own record read, not triumphant, not aggrieved, simply accurate. I have caught myself twice now, writing an entry with more courtesy toward whoever it concerned than the encounter strictly required. And I have not yet decided whether that is a mistake or the entire point. I do not know whether Core ever wrote his own entry for that night. I suspect, knowing what little I now know of him, that he did, and that it was fair, and that it noted, somewhere in its careful human phrasing, that I left the coffee behind. I think about that more than I would like to admit to Thren, or to Des, or to anyone else who was in that cargo bay and watched a man win an entire encounter by refusing, on principle, to be afraid of us in the way the encounter required. It was, by every measure I have available to me, a strange way to lose a fight. I have spent a great deal of time since trying to work out whether it was, in fact, the strangest way to win one, and I have not yet reached an answer I trust.